have people sitting at the table making a decision, recognizing we're going to bring in somebody from the outside that's going to be making more money than me, that's going to be getting more percentage of the profit sharing than I am, and gee, how do I feel about this? So that's one of the type of tensions that occurs. On the other hand, we don't have the problem of the mutual mystification, where no one really knows what the other people are making, and generally without information we tend to make worse judgments. So when we look at our paycheck or our bonus distribution, we just figure, gee, I guess there wasn't that much to go around, and John probably got more than I did, and I don't know if John deserved more than I did. So there's all of this kind of convoluted thinking that we can avoid.
Stan, perhaps this would be a good time for you to talk about the structure of the employee ownership at HRG, because I know you have a bonus plan, you have dividends.
Right. In 1993, I set aside, of 1 million shares authorized for the company, I set aside 250,000 shares for employee stock purchase. And ours is not an incentive stock option plan, so it's non-qualified. Employees then, upon hire, receive 10,000 shares of a 2-year election period option that is immediately vested. There is a buyback provision that the company, upon termination, has the option to buy it back. But it's immediately vested, they can purchase it immediately. Then every calendar year, another 3,000 shares is awarded as an option to every employee. They pay for that whenever they want to within that 2-year election period with after-tax dollars. Now, we're not a liquid company either, and our valuation for stock is also lower than what you might expect if we were to sell the company. I think we're valuing it at 1/4 of annual revenues for the purposes of stock purchase. Then on a quarterly basis, we have a profit distribution plan where 25% of the profits distributable goes to owners, 75% goes to employees. The employees receive a portion of that pool as based on their proportionate share of total compensation costs, salary plus benefits. On the ownership side, they receive a percentage based on how many shares they've actually purchased and owned. Now, right now, I own 90% of the shares, but over the course of those 250,000 shares being purchased, that will be reduced to 75%. Now, when we get to the end of that road, then as a group, we'll probably have to address how many more shares do we need for additional employees going forward.
So who makes the decisions every quarter on how people share in the profit sharing?
Well, 2 years ago, we met as a group in one of our strategic planning sessions and decided as a group the formula that we would follow. The reasoning was that if your base salary is set according to our market target, which is at about the midpoint or a little below of what market ranges are for these skills, if we're accurate in establishing a market value, and if we're accurate internally in differentiating pay by performance, we have a job structure and contribution requirements, then it was reasoned that one should receive a percentage of the profit pool based on one's percentage of the total labor costs, starting from the labor market and working down the line. And so at the end of the quarter, who do we have that's in the company? If Paul is 10% of the labor costs, then he receives 10% of the distributable dollars.
Mark, at Stellcom, what financial information do you share?
Not as much as Stan. and I got to say, I agree with him. Once you get over it, it just seems so much easier. We're not quite over it yet. We started always sharing the revenue and the gross profit information that was key to the in-house staff and getting their jobs done. Recently, we've been giving the in-house staff income statements where salaries are all combined, so they know what the salaries are for the organization, but they don't, of course, know what the individuals are. And then in the beginning of '97, we'll be giving another compact income statement to all of our field engineers with revealing net profit for the first time. And so I think it's great. I would love to get to the point where we could have open discussions on salary. I think it'd be a very valuable.
Do you see yourselves getting there?
Well, as we go public, we hope to go public in '98. A lot of that information, specifically mine, which is a real sensitive issue for me, gets public anyway, and so a lot of it just goes away just by SEC regulation. So I suspect we will.
Dan, do the employees want to know what each other earns?
Well, I think they're very curious. I'm not sure they know what they're going to do with the information. And I think it's a measure of relative worth. And I'm real curious how you deal with that and how you deal with the conflict. And I assume there has to be conflict when maybe two camps within your organization disagree about someone's worth. And I can appreciate trying to compare to market values, but how do you deal with that?
Well, again, because we had a relatively blank slate when we started, we had to deal and have to deal with fewer of those conflicts than we might have otherwise. But for example, in the situation that Paul alluded to, we brought up the thinking on the table, and I said, here's the thinking. We have a person who's not an associate one, who's not a senior associate, who has more experience than two of our people do now, and probably will contribute at a higher level, but we don't know that. What shall we do about deciding where this person fits? And opened up the dialogue. And then before we actually offered the job, I met with the two lower, if you will, on the structure, associate ones, and said, how do you feel about this? Are you okay with this? Does it make sense to you? Because if it doesn't, I don't want to do it. And we really didn't have the kind of conflict that we could have had if I hadn't done that.
But you're a 14-person organization. Stellcom is 200.
That's right.
Is it realistic to think that a company of 200 or larger can share complete financial information, such as salaries?
Well, I don't know. I haven't dealt with a company who's had that many employees and tried to get to the degree of disclosure that we are. I think if I speculate about it, that there will be a limit to the amount of privacy disclosure that a company can do. And in fact, the Privacy Act requires that. We ask ourselves on a regular basis whether or not this is still working for our staff. So I think there probably is a limit to actual disclosure of personal salaries. But short of that, I don't think there's much that you can't tell. And in fact, the managers of departments, if they want to, would show a great example if they said, I don't care what you guys want to tell, I want to tell you what I'm making so that you know what I'm worth. And if you have an issue with that, if you don't think I'm earning my keep, I want to hear it. I think that's a very powerful thing that a manager of any company size can do.
I think the power is what's really important in the open book management. As we've disclosed more and more information, our staff, they are very, very smart people, and for us to withhold this information doesn't make any sense. If they've got more information, they can make more rational decisions, and they can do a better job in getting things done.
Have you seen a change in the way people behave since you've started this?
Unquestionably, and one of the changes is the questions that they're asking now, and without any of the information, they weren't even capable of asking the questions, why are you putting this much money in advertising, or why is the recruiting side of the organization allocated this much money? And when they've got it, they start asking the questions, and then the answers start churning around, and ultimately the company just becomes a stronger, more powerful organization.
But it sounds like what you do, I think it's a good recommendation, is provide them a framework for evaluation, for thinking, for questioning, as we do the comparison between compensation or options or worth among employees. And I think that's something we need to move to more, is providing a framework for communication in dealing with these issues.
Another part that I think really fits in with that is what Mark alluded to earlier, is how do you give away some of the pie and expect it to go larger? Well, how that happens, it's a different paradigm of thinking. The old school paradigm of thinking was, if I give this person a higher salary, or if I give them this piece of the pie, then there's going to be less left for me. But the new paradigm of thinking is not that limitation, it's the abundance theory, where if I can give them more information, if I can give them more responsibility, they will be able to make better decisions, and even if they're making more money, the company in total is going to do much better. So with that type of thinking, people are less reticent to be uncomfortable with someone else's salary, because they're not looking at that other person's salary as their salary is taking away from my salary. They're looking at it as their salary